It's time for us to take a look at what's been happening through the weekend in politics, a range of political issues, both federally and then in the New South Wales by-election, then through to Victoria and South Australia. Ricky Lambert joins me. Hi, Ricky. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Good weekend, but off the football, where obviously the Crows getting up by a point. You and I were quite excited about that.
We are very happy about that.
But that's coming up a little bit later in the bulletin. We'll have a look more at sport, but I want to ask you about this by-election and, is it a win for Scott Morrison rather than New South Wales coalition?
Well, it's certainly going to put a spring in the step of the coalition parties, but it's a win for the Nationals. The National Party have retained that seat. In fact, there's been a swing towards them, and as John McDonnell writes on our Flow News 24 website, even though there was a sex scandal involving the previous member, somehow they've had a swing in their direction.
It is interesting because there is around 24% of the vote going to One Nation and the Shooters and Fishers parties. That would seem to indicate a protest still against the coalition in terms of the fact that the preferencing probably went their way to the Nationals, but people were saying, well, actually, I still don't really like where things are heading under Morrison.
There is also a rejection of the Labor vote as well. Labor was in the low 20%, and the Labor opposition leader Jody McKay from New South Wales fronted the media yesterday, quite apologetic that they would do better to represent voters in the Hunter Valley, because they know there's federal ramifications here as well. Labor can't afford to be losing seats in that part of the country as well. So there's panic from both the major parties at the strong non-major party vote in that seat. Interesting
too, because take that at a wider level, does it look like with the opinion polls that John referred to, the Channel 9 poll particularly, is there a undertaking here that Labor now need to go back to its heartland? Is John's summation that they may have moved a little bit too far away from the issues that matter, like jobs in the regions, like large-scale manufacturing, energy that needs to keep those jobs, like this aluminium smelter? Is there, in this particular situation, time for the Labor Party, and particularly maybe Anthony Albanese, to readdress federally what he sees at a state level, and maybe listen to Joel Fitzgibbons, who is somebody who knows all about the Hunter region?
Well, you go back to the roots of the Labor Party. It's in the union movement, unions representing workers, the shearers' strike and all the rest of it. And that's where workers wanted their jobs protected and saved in the Hunter Valley, being coal and aluminium as well. The gas-fired power plant is about underpinning those jobs in creating aluminium. So I think that's what Labor does need to rethink. And I think those members who, like Joel Fitzgibbon, who's from the Hunter, has a federal seat there, has been trying to stand up for workers who have jobs in what other parts of Labor and the Greens in the inner city are calling dirty jobs and jobs that need to go. But people want to keep their job.
Okay, now just a quick one on Victoria and South Australia. We've got the response to the state budget in Victoria, and on Flow News 24, I know that you put some work into this. How did you see the budget, and how do you see maybe the coalition in Victoria responding to Labor's budget?
Well, the coalition were quite good in responding to the budget. Even beforehand, their commentary was about debt and deficit, and they were negative about the forecast taxes. When the state parliament meets tomorrow in Victoria, they'll start debating the new mental health tax that they're going to impose on businesses there. But the budget was a big fizzer when it came to the regions. Both the Victorian Nationals and the Farmers Federation in Victoria both said, look, they're very disappointed at the lack of spending there. And the president of the Farmers Federation said actually that cynically she thinks there'll be more spending next year when it's an election budget.
All right, now a little bit for the locals in South Australia. There's been discussion about funding for Martindale Hall, which is at Mintaro near Clare, an icon of South Australia.
Yeah, this one's on the agenda for debate today, and it's about getting more publicity and awareness about Martindale Hall and showcasing it more often. I think this is code for there being more private functions or events staged at Martindale Hall, because it is quite restrictive now. I've been there myself not long ago with the family, and you do need to look after the interior. It can't just have, dances and ballroom activity going on there all the time. But it's good to see that they're coming up, and that's what they're doing with the legislation, is creating ways to protect that Clare Valley icon so that it is actually a showcase, but it's there for a very long time to come.
And also it's cost efficient to be able to do the upgrading and the repairs that need to be done. Interesting stuff. Ricky Lambert going around state politics and also looking at the federal implications of the weekend. Good to have you this morning. We'll catch up with you again this week.